Manhattan is home to the most famous urban skyline in the world. Over 1.5 million people and more than 4,000 towers jostle for space on an island that boasts some of the world's most desirable and expensive real estate.
The buildings of the city definitely reflect the character, its density, its closeness. One trying to outdo the other, one trying to be bigger, better, shinier, more important, more interesting.
New York is a city of constant, abrupt surprises. It is the ultimate montage of places.
It is definitely a magical city, absolutely. And part of its magic is that there's so much of it, and it's so tall and so striking and so unique.
It's just like being on the subway. It's like being on the street. The buildings are doing the same thing. They're kind of auditioning. Everybody here is auditioning.
New York is American capitalism's centre of gravity. Commerce races through the city's bloodstream, and throughout its history, money has shaped the architecture of the city.
Oh, well, there's only one major force that's been here from the first days, and that is the wonderful world of greed. New York City was founded in the 17th century as a place for trading colonies and bringing back things to Europe which were highly valued there. And that principle here has been bringing things to make people money through the city for literally almost 400 years. In the early 19th century, there was a grid plan imposed on the small existing city, and that grid plan had 200-foot blocks developed literally so that plots that were 25 by 100 were easily available, easily sold, even if they sort of were just fields with hills in them. So everything was made to make development easy.
By the early 20th century, New York's economy was booming, and the city's business tycoons sought to express their newfound confidence and power by commissioning ever more grandiose buildings. Within a generation, Manhattan's skyline had erupted with skyscrapers. From the imposing Gothic splendour of the Woolworth Building to the precise Art Deco detailing of the Chrysler Building and the Empire State, the architectural styles of the towers varied. At the time they were built, each became the tallest building in the world. And in New York, size mattered a lot. But the Depression and the Second World War brought many major architectural projects to a halt, and when construction resumed, architects had developed new ways of building towers.
After the Second World War, you might say cynically, Americans craved the cleansing that occurred in European cities as a result of the bombings. We embarked on a period of urban renewal which was modeled after what Le Corbusier had proposed for Paris, for example, in the 1920s. Cleansing whole areas, towers, unrelated to each other in a continuous field, usually of green.
One building was to become New York's finest example of the Corbusier-inspired tower, and quickly became an architectural icon.
The brave new world of the corporate, modern movement skyscraper was born in New York City with Lever House. The building was given over to Skidmore, Owings & Merrill and to Gordon Bunshaft to make a corporate building in the middle of an apartment area. And what Gordon Bunshaft did, it took his block front on Park Avenue and turned it into the mandatory slab, the sort of open plaza, but instead of facing that slab on the avenue and blocking out the light and blocking out everybody else's views, he took his office building and very genteelly turned it on the side so that the tower, the square, the slab actually goes down the side street, sort of like as if you were on a train and you were saying, "After you, madam." The building is beautifully detailed. Thick glass, it's beautifully polished. The framing around it is minimal and perfectly done. There's variation so that you don't have the same opaque quality. There's a darkened border, then the light panels, then the darkened border at every floor. And what that building on Park Avenue did is transform single-handedly the modern movement into the style for the modern corporation.
One other tower rivaled Lever House in quality and attention to detail. Seagram Building was built for the giant distillery company by the visionary German architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe.
Mies just plain kept up the idea of great materials. He built a wonderful plaza with 2 rectangular pools, with a little bit of real green, trees in the background, green serpentine marble on either side, and then against it sits a slab. The slab is clad in bronze. There may be another building that has bronze cladding in the United States. I don't know it. It was just plain rich beyond anything a speculative builder would do. It's a building that's set up wonderful materials, beautiful proportions, and when you roll by or you walk by, it's a wonderfully understated building. It doesn't say, "Hi, home of the whiskey," or whatever it is. It just says 375. You have to fill in Park Avenue, and it is truly wonderful.
But most office architecture failed to match the standards set by Seagram Building and Lever House.
These buildings were models that no one could truly follow, or very few, and certainly the speculative community seized on those models and produced a reductio, almost reductio ad absurdum version of them, in which Mies's famous aphorism, "less is more," became a license for banality, cheapness, vulgarity on the part of the development community. With Seagram Building, which is so subtle, once you strip away the subtlety and you're reduced to the curtain wall, and you keep making the curtain wall thinner and cheaper and the glass bigger and the detailing less, you got buildings which are totally mediocre. You know, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill in the post-World War II era, the great firm which did many of the office buildings in the model of the Seagram Building, were called the 3 Blind Mies, because they ripped off the master and didn't quite do it right.
Since then, real estate has triumphed over real architecture as commercial forces continue to stifle innovation.
The developers are looking for something that will sell, something that won't offend people, something that they can make money on. So I think it's very difficult for some sort of an architectural statement to survive.
In other ways, capitalism has worked for us in the sense that it has given us the freedom to express ourselves in all the arts. And maybe it's failed us somehow in New York City in terms of architecture in the past.
Think of New York, right? 8 million people. It's a vast, 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 vast city. We're talking about a handful of buildings here that are remarkable, simply a handful, whereas the rest are really quite mediocre. It shouldn't only be about a handful, and mediocrity should not be accepted on many, many different buildings.
But one of Manhattan's post-war buildings was anything but mediocre. The ambitious and radical Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, designed by America's greatest architect.
Frank Lloyd Wright was going to make a name for himself, and what he did is put himself in residential Fifth Avenue, and there he built an inverted concrete building, a building that went up as it expanded, not decreased, a building that looks like a great hat, a building that was built to house a spiraling ramp that goes down as viewers see art arranged around the spiral. Everything's a circle, everything comes round. It's a building that you think would be used at its very, very best if you had something that was linear and went around it and you were on skates and could speed down those ramps. It's a truly wonderful building.
But the curved walls and sloping floors of the Guggenheim have made it a challenging place to exhibit works of art.
In the battle of egos and wills between artists and architects, I'm afraid that Frank Lloyd Wright, in a way, laid down the gauntlet with the Guggenheim Museum and made a very difficult museum for one to show contemporary art.
The Guggenheim was commissioned by a wealthy individual with a deep commitment to the arts. But by the early 1970s, Manhattan was in the grip of a severe economic recession, and with few exceptions, construction works ground to a halt.
Foreigners often experience a severe cultural shock when they first set eyes on Manhattan. For much of the most important city in America is a slum. The World Trade Center is a structure of dubious architectural merit that has just become the world's tallest building. But at a price of $650 million, in sterling that's 270 million pounds, the World Trade Center is surely a monstrous luxury in a city that's on the brink of social and economic collapse.
The World Trade Center was designed by Minoru Yamasaki. Each tower had 110 stories, and between them contained 10.5 million square feet of office space. When they opened in 1973, they were the world's tallest structures, but their size didn't guarantee their success.
Nobody came. They built those two big buildings and they had no tenants. It was so embarrassing that the Port Authority was having to leave the lights on at night to make people think there were people in there, because if they left them dark, people would get dispirited about the emptiness of these vacant buildings.
The Trade Center produced these two monoliths, which had a certain magic because you could see the space of the sky between them, but beyond that, they were repellingly boring. From a user's point of view, the distance from the window to the core, where there were many desks and cubicles, was really too great, and you never knew what was going on outside. You have to walk over to the window wall, and the structural system had the window framing so narrow that, in fact, the thrill of the view was rather compromised. So the combination of all of those together was frightful from an urban point of view.
Yamasaki, who died in 1986, hoped that the Trade Center would represent mankind's belief in humanity, express human dignity, and symbolize the value of cooperation between men. On September the 11th, 2001, his hopes were destroyed.
An astonishing series of acts of terrorism has been perpetrated in the United States. Countless numbers of people were killed and injured when at least 3 apparently hijacked passenger aircraft were flown into buildings in New York and Washington. The twin towers of the tallest building in New York, the World Trade Center, have been destroyed, reduced to rubble.
The destruction of the Twin Towers punched a hole in New York's psyche, as well as its skyline. Since the attacks, the future of Ground Zero has been the subject of an impassioned debate.
I began to worry that the powers that be, the developers, the politicians, would build as much square footage as possible to recoup as much of the economic potential from the site as they could, without concern for the architecture.
To encourage architects to get involved in the debate, the New York gallery owner Max Protech invited members of the profession to suggest ways to redevelop the site. He exhibited contributions from 61 artists and architects, including the Baghdad-born, London-based designer Zaha Hadid.
Of all the people who's really ripe to build a major building and make a major statement, it's Zaha. And I think it would be a very good response by the United States to ask an Arab and a Muslim to build on that site. And we chose the very best people we could think of. Richard Gluckman, who's a New York architect, who did a very touching and thoughtful site. Vito Acconci, who's an artist who does architectural public work, did an outrageous project. It looks a little bit like Swiss cheese, but he felt he might as well put holes in the buildings before someone else did. And it turned out to be a brilliant building. So who cares where the idea comes from, and if there's a little humor, so all the better. Of course, most of the sketches and most of the drawings and ideas are conceptual, but I guarantee you that these people really would understand a program and how to deal with it, and could build within budget, and would build something spectacular.
The fabric of Manhattan changed irrevocably in September 2001, and for many New Yorkers, architecture has now taken on a new and vital resonance.
I think by seeing the airplanes manned by our adversaries going into the World Trade Center, attacking those buildings as symbols of our economic, political, and cultural dominance, that they understood the importance of architecture and the importance it could play. And I think it might change the way our city deals with architecture in the future.
This is already starting to happen. When the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation presented plans for redeveloping Ground Zero, they were condemned by many New Yorkers. As a result, the corporation announced that an international competition would determine what would replace the Twin Towers. Whatever is built will have to reflect the sensitivities that many New Yorkers now feel towards the site. The destruction of the World Trade Center is one of many recent events that have made New Yorkers reassess their city. Since the early 1990s, high-profile restoration and makeover projects have transformed parts of Manhattan. The area around Times Square was once the hub of New York's vibrant theatre district, but in the 1970s, the popularity of the Broadway musical waned, and the neighborhood became notorious for sex shops and the vice trade. In 1993, Robert Stern's architectural practice was invited to devise plans that would revive the square.
Typical controls say you cannot have anything brighter than this, you can't have any signs bigger than this, you can't do this. They're always, thou shalt not. Ours said, thou will make your signs as big or bigger than the ones on the buildings torn down. They will be as bright or brighter. Once you put the marketplace at play and you say you can make anything brighter than, everybody starts a competition. So it is a new place and an old place at the same time.
I find it completely overdone, very silly, and sort of a waste of energy on many levels. But yet when I'm there, you sort of get this like, I love New York feeling. It just feels so incredible. You feel like, gee, I'm in New York. It's so fabulous. It's like movie music or something.
But the Manhattan cityscape ultimately draws its energy from the mass and concentration of buildings that crowd onto the island.
I think that the density of the city is its draw. I mean, the fact that you can have all this action around you, anywhere you step, anywhere you look, and that's a function of all those densely built buildings on that dense grid. Everywhere you go, you see something. It might not be as beautiful and as incredibly creative as those of us who look at architecture would like it to be, but there's a lot of life to them.
We're a pretty aggressive lot and not afraid to express ourselves. And you can see that in the buildings. And a very diverse city. And that's also apparent in our architecture. And if it looks a little bit like a battleground, it is a reflection of New York and New Yorkers.